Welcome, wanderer. Tonight, the Firefly finds its way through the Yorkshire moors, where old magic lingers in stone and hearth fire. It leads us to a cottage that has stood empty, waiting for someone who knows that the oldest promises are kept not with grand gestures, but with simple offerings and patient care. The cottage had been empty for 3 years when Eleanor first saw it. She'd been driving through the Yorkshire countryside, half lost on winding roads that hadn't been updated on any map since before the war, when she rounded a corner and there it was. A stone farmhouse hunched against the hillside, like something out of a storybook. Moss crept up its walls, the roof sagged in the middle, and the windows were dark as closed eyes. But the bones were good. She could see that even from the road. Solid Yorkshire stone, a wide chimney, and behind it, rolling fields that hadn't seen a plough in years. The estate agent had been apologetic. "It's been on the market for ages, love. The last family just left. Didn't even clear out all their things. Said they couldn't stay another winter. Some nonsense about noises in the walls and things moving about. Old houses settle, you know, make sounds." Eleanor had nodded and made an offer that same afternoon. She'd been saving for years. She was tired of the city, tired of the cramped flat where she could hear her neighbors' arguments through the walls, tired of commuting, tired of the crowds and the particular loneliness of living among millions. She wanted something quiet, something hers. And she'd always dreamed of opening a bookshop, not a chain store, but a real one, the kind with creaking floors and mismatched furniture, warm lamplight, and the mingled scent of books and brewing tea. She sometimes closed her eyes and envisioned it. She could almost smell the tea, the coffee, the old wood, and the old paper. This cottage could be that. With work, of course. The first month was all demolition and discovery. Eleanor ripped out water-damaged drywall and found the original plaster underneath, marked with horsehair and centuries of handprints. She pulled up stained carpet and uncovered flagstones, worn smooth by generations of feet. In the larder, she found shelves still lined with jars of preserves, gone dark with age. And in the bedroom upstairs, a child's wooden toy, a horse with a leather mane, abandoned in a corner. The house felt sad, she thought, abandoned, but not empty. She noticed the small things first. She'd leave her tools in a pile at the end of the day, and in the morning they'd be arranged by size and type. She'd sweep the hearth before bed and wake to find it swept again, the ashes disposed of, kindling laid ready for a fire. Once she left a loaf of bread dough to rise overnight and found it the next morning perfectly formed and ready for the oven. At first, she assumed she was tired, forgetting what she'd done. Renovation work was exhausting. But then came the morning she found the ladder moved. She left it propped against the western wall where she was planning to patch the plaster. In the morning, it was against the eastern wall, the wall she'd been avoiding because she wasn't sure yet how to handle the water damage there. When she climbed up to investigate, she found the damage was worse than she'd thought. If she'd waited another week, the whole section might have come down on its own. Was someone or something helping her? Was something in the house? Eleanor wasn't easily frightened. She'd grown up on her grandmother's stories. The old Yorkshire tales about boggarts and bar guests, about things that lived in the spaces between. Her grandmother had always insisted there was more to the world than what you could see in electric light. The old things don't leave just because we stop believing, she'd said. They just get quieter. So, Eleanor did what her grandmother would have done. She went to the village. The library was small, tucked between the post office and a shop that sold wool and walking sticks. As she walked in, Eleanor remembered why she liked libraries so much. It was the musky sweetness of old paper. The librarian was a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and hands gnarled from arthritis. "You've bought the old Ashworth place," she said. "I have. I'm turning it into a bookshop with a cafe." The librarian's eyebrows rose. "Are you now? That's ambitious. House has been empty a good while." 3 years, the agent said. Aye. The Ashworths couldn't take another winter there. Before them, it was the Crowthers, and before that, the Blackwoods. None of them lasted more than a few years. Not since old Tom Blackwood died. He was the last one who knew how to live there proper. Eleanor leaned against the desk, looking straight into her eyes. "What do you mean, live there proper?" The librarian studied her for a long moment. Then she stood and beckoned Eleanor to follow her to the back of the library, where the local history collection gathered dust. She pulled down a slim volume bound in green cloth. Household Spirits of the North, a survey of Yorkshire folklore, 1923. "Read that," she said, placing it in Eleanor's hands, "especially the chapter on hobs. And if you've got any sense, you'll follow what it says." She looked Eleanor up and down. "You're from a big city, aren't you?" "Yes, London." Yeah, that's what I thought." "Well, a city girl might find it hard to believe some of these things, but trust me, it's all true." Eleanor took the book home and read it by lamplight that evening, sitting in what would eventually become the cafe area, surrounded by dust sheets and paint cans. The chapter on hobs was marked with a faded ribbon, as though many people had consulted it before. The hob, the book explained, is a household spirit peculiar to the northern counties, particularly Yorkshire and Durham. Unlike the brownie of Scotland or the hobgoblin of the Midlands, the hob is deeply tied to a specific dwelling, most often a farmhouse or cottage with an active hearth. Hobs are helpful by nature, performing domestic tasks during the night hours, sweeping, churning butter, tending fires, organizing tools, and sometimes assisting with farm animals. They expect no payment but appreciate small offerings of cream, fresh bread, or oat cakes left by the hearth. However, hobs are notoriously particular and easily offended. They must never be thanked directly, as this implies the relationship is one of service rather than mutual habitation. They must never be given clothing, as this is considered a dismissal. They must never be watched at their work or spoken of disrespectfully. A hob that feels slighted or unwanted will either leave the household entirely, a great misfortune, or transform into a boggart, a mischievous or malevolent spirit that will plague the household until the family is driven away. Hobs are believed to remain in a single location for centuries, passed down through generations as part of the household itself. They do not follow families that move away, nor can they be transplanted. When a house is abandoned or demolished, the hob fades, having lost its purpose and anchor to the world. Eleanor set the book down and looked around the cottage. The silence felt different now, not empty, but waiting. "Is that what you are?" she said softly to the quiet room. "A hob?" No answer came, but she hadn't expected one. The book had been clear. Hobs didn't reveal themselves. They worked in shadow and silence, and the relationship between hob and household was built on unspoken understanding. She thought about the Ashworth family, fleeing after one winter. They wouldn't have known about hobs, wouldn't have understood what they were living with. They'd probably been frightened by the unexplained movements, the sounds in the walls, and before them, the Crowthers and all the others who'd left. None of them had known. But old Tom Blackwood had. He'd lived there for 70 years, the librarian said. He must have maintained the old ways. And now she knows as well. Eleanor stood and walked to the hearth. It was a massive thing, original to the cottage, with an iron grate and a stone lintel, carved with a date, 1687. She'd planned to keep it, of course. It was beautiful, the heart of the whole house. She hadn't realized it might be literal. She'd been living on takeaway and sandwiches, too busy with renovation to cook properly. But now she went to the kitchen area, currently just a camping stove and a small fridge, and took stock. She had milk, oats, honey, butter. She made oat cakes the way her grandmother had taught her, mixing oats and butter and a pinch of salt, rolling them thin, cooking them on a griddle until they were golden and crisp. The smell filled the cottage, warm and homely. When they were done, she arranged 3 of them on a small plate and poured cream into a shallow bowl. Not a modern dish, but a piece of earthenware she'd found in the larder, old and simple. It somehow seemed just right. She placed both by the hearth as the sun set. "I don't know if you can hear me," she said quietly, feeling foolish but pressing on anyway. "But if you're here, if you've been helping, thank you. I mean," she stopped, remembering the book's warning about direct thanks. "I mean, I'm grateful for the company, for the partnership. This is your home as much as mine. More, probably. You've been here a lot longer." She paused, then added, "I'm going to make this place beautiful again. I'm going to fill it with books and people and good smells and warmth. But only if that's all right with you. I'll try to do things properly, the old way, when I can. I'll keep the hearth burning. I'll learn." The cottage was silent. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. She was talking to an empty room, leaving food out for something that might not even exist. That might just be her own exhaustion and wishful thinking, creating patterns where there were none. But then she remembered the book and felt a little bit less silly. She fell asleep thinking about what she would find in the morning. At the break of day, she rushed to the hearth. The plate and bowl were empty, licked clean, and the hearth, which she'd left cold, was burning with a small, steady fire. She expected this and even hoped it would happen. Still, she was a little surprised. So it's all true? After that, things changed. Eleanor fell into a rhythm with her invisible housemate. She worked during the day, scraping and painting and measuring. She cooked simple meals and always left a portion by the hearth before bed. Oat cakes, fresh bread, cream, sometimes honey. She spoke aloud sometimes, narrating her plans for the cottage, asking questions she didn't expect to be answered. "I'm thinking the front room for the bookshop proper," she'd say, measuring the walls. "Fiction here, poetry by the window where the light's good, and the back room for the cafe. Small tables, mismatched chairs. I want it to feel like someone's kitchen, you know? Welcoming." The help became more obvious. Shelves she'd been struggling to level would be perfect in the morning. Paint cans she'd left disordered would be organized by color. Once, when she was too tired to wash her brushes properly and left them crusted with paint, she found them the next day clean and standing in a jar of water. But the hob remained unseen. She never caught a glimpse, never heard more than the occasional creak that might have been floorboards or might have been something else. The cottage transformed week by week. Eleanor hired a roofer to fix the sagging section, a plumber to update the ancient pipes, but she did the rest herself, with the hob's invisible assistance. She plastered and painted, sanded and varnished. She found second-hand bookshelves at estate sales and hauled them home in a borrowed van. She discovered an old bakery selling off equipment and bought a small oven, a coffee maker, a glass-fronted case for pastries. The village began to take notice. People would stop by to see how the work was progressing. The librarian came with a box of books, donations for when you open, and stayed for tea. A farmer from up the road brought fresh eggs. The woman who ran the wool shop asked if Eleanor would stock local guidebooks. "It'll be good to have the old place lived in again," she said, looking around approvingly. "It's a happy house, that. You can feel it. It just needs people in it." Eleanor almost said, "It has people in it already," but caught herself. 6 months after she'd bought the cottage, Eleanor was ready to open. The bookshop filled the front room, with shelves running floor to ceiling, and a reading nook by the window with 2 armchairs she'd reupholstered herself. The cafe occupied the back, with 6 small tables and a counter displaying fresh scones and cakes. The whole place smelled of books and coffee and wood polish. She decided to call it Hearthside Books. The night before opening day, Eleanor stayed up late making preparations. She baked bread, arranged flowers in jam jars, set out teacups on their saucers. She was too nervous to sleep, too excited. She kept finding small tasks to do, straightening already straight shelves, wiping already clean counters. Finally, near midnight, she stopped and looked around. The cottage glowed in the lamplight, warm and welcoming. It was everything she'd dreamed of. "We did it," she said softly to the quiet room. "We actually did it." She left the usual offering by the hearth. Tonight, a special one. Fresh bread, cream, and a small pot of honey from the farmer up the road. Then she climbed the stairs to bed. She was woken just before dawn by a sound. It was soft, barely there, a shuffling, a whisper of movement. Eleanor lay very still, her heart hammering. The sound was coming from downstairs. Every instinct told her to investigate, but the book's warning echoed in her mind. They must never be watched at their work. She stayed in bed, listening. She heard the soft clink of dishes, the whisper of a broom, the creak of the floorboards in a rhythm that suggested pacing, checking, arranging. It went on for perhaps half an hour. Then silence. When she finally went downstairs, she found the cafe arranged differently. The tables had been moved, not much, but enough to create a better flow, a more welcoming space. The flowers had been rearranged in their jars. The books on the front display table had been reordered, and she realized with a start that they'd been organized thematically, all of them about home, about belonging, about finding one's place. On the counter sat a small object she'd never seen before, a wooden bookmark carved from dark oak and polished smooth. It was simple but beautiful, and along its length was carved a single word in old-fashioned script: welcome. Eleanor picked it up with shaking hands. Her eyes burned with sudden tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, remembering, I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad we're doing this together." The cottage seemed to settle around her, warm and content. Opening day was chaotic and wonderful. People came from the village and from the neighbouring towns, curious about the new bookshop in the old Ashworth place. Eleanor served coffee and scones, recommended books, rang up sales on the vintage cash register. The wooden bookmark stayed on the counter, and several customers asked about it, admiring the craftsmanship. "Local artisan," Eleanor said, which was true enough. By closing time, she was exhausted but euphoric. She'd sold 24 books, served 50 cups of coffee, and had 3 people ask when she'd be hosting a book club. She locked the door, flipped the sign to closed, and sagged against the counter. "We did it," she said again, to the cottage, to the hob, to herself. "First day is done." She made herself dinner, soup and bread, and ate it at one of the small cafe tables, too tired to go upstairs. Then she prepared the evening offering and placed it by the hearth. As she straightened, she noticed something. On the mantelpiece, which had been empty that morning, sat a small, carved wooden bird. A robin, she thought, with careful detail in its feathers and a bright painted breast. It was old, worn smooth by handling, and she recognized it somehow. Then she remembered the toy she'd found in the upstairs bedroom, the horse with the leather mane. This was a companion piece, something from the same set, the same hand, something that had been hidden away for generations, kept safe. The hob was giving her gifts. Eleanor understood then, with a clarity that made her chest ache, that the hob had been alone for a very long time. It had watched families come and go, had tried to help them, had been met with fear or ignorance. It had maintained the cottage in emptiness, waiting for someone who would understand. She picked up the robin carefully and held it in her palm. "I'm staying," she told the quiet room. "I'm not going anywhere. This is home now, for both of us." The fire in the hearth crackled softly, and Eleanor could have sworn she heard just for a moment a sound like a contented sigh. The months that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Hearthside books became a fixture in the village. Locals came for the morning coffee, browsed the shelves, lingered in the armchairs. Eleanor hosted a monthly book club, started stocking local authors, and began selling the wool shop owner's hand-dyed yarn alongside the guidebooks. And every night, she left an offering by the hearth. And every morning, she found small evidences of the hob's care. Books perfectly shelved, floors swept, the coffee maker cleaned and ready. Sometimes there were gifts: a smooth pebble on the windowsill, a sprig of hawthorn flowers, a pressed leaf tucked into a book, a small, delicate bird feather tied with ribbon. She never saw the hob. She never tried to. That wasn't how this worked. But she felt it, in the warmth of the cottage, even on the coldest days, in the way customers remarked on how peaceful the shop felt, how welcoming. She felt it in the small kindnesses that accumulated like snow, invisible individually but transformative together. One evening in December, nearly a year after she'd first seen the cottage, Eleanor sat by the hearth after closing, a cup of tea warming her hands. Snow was falling outside and the shop was decorated for the holidays. A small tree in the corner, garlands on the mantel, candles in the windows. "Do you remember the first time I made you oatcakes?" she said to the room. "I was so nervous. I didn't know if you were real or if I was just going mad, talking to myself in an old cottage." She sipped her tea, watching the fire. "I'm glad you're real," she continued. "I'm glad this is real. I never thought I'd find something like this, a place that feels like it's exactly where I'm meant to be. A partnership with someone I've never seen, but trust completely." The fire popped, sending up a small shower of sparks. "The old ways matter," Eleanor said softly. "The keeping of rituals, the small offerings, the respect for things we can't always see or understand. My grandmother knew that. You knew that. And now I know it too." She finished her tea and stood, stretching. On the mantel, the wooden robin sat beside a growing collection of small treasures: the pebbles, the feather with the ribbon, a smooth piece of sea glass, an acorn cup. She added another, a small key she'd found in the garden, old and ornate. Then she prepared the evening offering. Tonight, special mince pies she'd made from her grandmother's recipe, and cream in the earthenware bowl. "Merry Christmas," she said to the cottage, to the hob, to the life they'd built together. "Thank you for making this home." She climbed the stairs to bed, and behind her, the cottage settled into its own contentment. Not empty, never empty again, but full of the quiet magic of being cherished, being tended, being home. In the morning, she would find a gift by the hearth, a carved wooden bookmark, twin to the first, with a new word etched along its length: family. But for now, she slept, and in the darkness, the hob went about its work, sweeping, tidying, tending the fire, as it had for 300 years, and would for 300 more, as long as there was someone to remember, someone to keep the old ways alive, someone to share the hearth. And so, our Firefly finds its resting place, and another tale comes to its gentle close. Thank you for joining me on tonight's journey. May sleep carry you softly into morning. Sleep well, wanderer.